back to my channel and another tutorial. As promised, I have done a tutorial on the new Shamballa Fringe bag, the Peaceful bag. So yeah, let me show you some details about this bag. This is a really fast sew, super fast. The thing that took the longest was cutting the fringe. I did not use connectors as I did not have metal connectors, so I use the hidden connector method. Yeah, it's a large bag, it's a shoulder bag. And it has a recessed zipper and an interior zip pocket. Yeah, that's it. So without further ado, let's get making this bag. Okay, supplies and hardware. You are going to need medium rivets, four rectangular rings or four connectors. I'm using D-rings because I don't have any rectangular rings in stock right now. I am doing a hidden connector instead of the metal connectors for mine. 4 strap ends, 2 number 5 zipper pulls and number 5 zipper tape, 1 zipper end, a base piece, and I have put Decovil Heavy out of the seam allowances on the bottom, 2 lining contrast bands, one top band, two exterior pieces. My main is a cotton, so I have backed it with SF101 woven interfacing, and I put Decovil Heavy on there, or Decovil Lite on it as well, just to make it seem more vinyl-like. And then of course the back piece, which I am doing in vinyl. Two lengths for your straps. Now I, again, don't have metal connectors, so I'm making my own connectors. So these are my 4 connector pieces. Your left fringe, which I am doing out of leather, and right fringe out of leather. The reason I'm using leather is because they have nothing printed on the back, and the back of the fringe shows. 2 lining main panels, both backed with SF101 medium woven interfacing. Interior zipper pocket, and I'm also adding a slip pocket. So I'm going to be doing a zipper overlay. So that's going to be slightly different than the pattern. And you are going to need some flex foam or Biani soft and stable foam. So I'm going to go ahead off camera and I am going to prep my connector pieces and my handles. Okay, so now we need to get our top band ready to put on. So you need to draw a line 1/4 inch around the bottom part of this. So I am just using my ruler and measuring up 1/4. And then slightly working it around and making dashes around the curved parts so I can get a nice continuous line. So continue that all the way along this bottom side. Okay, so that is done. So now you're going to take some double-sided tape and put them onto the outside of that line we just drew. What we are doing is we're making it so we won't have a raw edge right here. If your machine does not like double-sided tape, you could also use glue here, fabric glue. Okay, and just into these corners, I'm going to make just little 1/8 of an inch snips. This is going to help work it into the curves. You don't want to go right up to the line, otherwise your cut will show, and we definitely don't want it to show. Okay, remove your tape, or not your tape, your paper from your tape. And we are going to fold this up along that line, sticking it to that tape. Approximately 1/4 of an inch. Doesn't have to be exact as long as it is even. Now when you get to the corners where we snip, just kind of pull it up and make sure that where our snips were are now on the wrong side and not going to show on the right side. Just like here, you can see how you can't see any of my raw edges or any of my little snips. I have them up high enough. And continue along the rest of this bottom edge of this band. My tape is very sticky, as you can see. I'm actually using a double-sided tape that's meant for leather. It definitely would not be domestic machine friendly. But if you need it, I do get it from Cleaner Supply. Okay, and double check on that corner too to make sure that there's no snip showing. And we are okay. I'm just going to give that a good finger press. Okay, now we're going to take our 2 fringe parts. We're going to match them up on the left and the right hand side, just following the curve of the top of the main panel piece, the front main panel piece. I'm using a very thin leather. I believe this is called a cow skin side from Tandy Leather. It's a 1 to 2 ounce leather, which I find just works perfect for fringe. It also is pretty good for wallets. Again, the reason I use the leather for the fringe is because there's no printing or words on the back side, where a lot of vinyls have a white backside or a fuzzy backside or whatever, where leather is just all natural. So it doesn't matter if you see the backside. Now you're going to see how this doesn't go right along the side, and that's what we want, because we don't want that fringe to be caught in the seam allowances later on. So do the exact same thing on the right hand side. You can see that it doesn't quite match up. It's cut a little wonky, but that's not going to matter because we're going to be cutting away much of this area here shortly. So if it doesn't match up perfectly along the top curve, no need to panic. As you can see, mine does not quite itself. Just make sure it is nice and smooth. That's what's important. Okay, now take your the top panel that we were just working on. Make sure that that tape or your glue is sticking down good. We don't want this seam that we have folded up to come out until after we've top stitched it. And you're going to line that up along the top of the main panel, over sandwiching the leather fringe. I use quite a few clips because you really don't want this to move. We're going to be sewing through all 3 of these layers here. Make sure your fringe is still out of the way. You do not want to catch that up into the top stitch and get a loopy fringe. And make sure it is super smooth. And we're going to top stitch right along this edge that we folded up with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, making sure that your fringe stays out of the way. Now this is going to be a focal point of your bag, so make sure your top stitching is nice and even and your tension's good, and you take extra care going around these curves to make it nice and even and rounded. There we go. We got a pretty nice top stitch there. Now you can remove all these clips. And we are going to reduce some of the bulk in behind this top panel because we have 3 layers going with thick leather and our vinyl and our woven interfacing and everything. So I'm just going to fold this back, and we're going to trim this out back to about 1/4 or a 1/2 inch away from the stitching we just did. It's probably wiser to use scissors. You know me with my rotary cutter. Not always the safest way to do it, but I always do. So this is just keeping the bulk out of the top seam for when we top stitch. Just like so. Okay, so we're going to take our 2 main panels and our bottom panel, and we are going to baste them to foam. I am using Pellon Flex Foam. So here I have all those pieces basted on. And now it's time to put our metal strap connectors. Again, I did not have metal strap connectors, so I'm going off pattern. I'm not going to show how I do it here. I'm actually going to use the needle and anchor version of the hidden connectors with no raw edges with a overlay, because I do have a cotton front and I can have no raw edges. So I'm also going to install my nameplate on the front at the same time. So yes, there's a tutorial for the hidden connectors with facings down in the description below if you do want to do it the way I do. Make sure you use some sort of Peltex or Decovil Heavy in behind your connectors to make sure that they're stabilized. Now what you're going to want to do is mark the centers of your top and bottom of your main panels. And how I do this is I just fold it in half and do a small clip within the seam allowance, like so. So make sure you've done that on your front and your back main panels, and you're also going to want to do that on your bottom panel on all 4 sides. Again, I like to do the snips just because they don't wipe away where a chalk marking or a pen marking may, but feel free to do however it is that works well for you. Okay, so now make sure you kind of push your fringe up and out of the way. You don't want it to get caught in here. And with your bottom panel, line it up with one of your main panels, matching up your center marks along the long edge of the bottom panel. Now it should match up almost perfectly in between the little notches that were cut for the main panel from the pattern piece. Okay, and go ahead and sew that with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Fold it over afterwards with the seam poking towards the bottom, and top stitch that with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then do the exact same thing with the other long side and the other panel. So this is both panels. My seams are folded towards the bottom of the bag, which is what we want. Again, keep your fringe intact. Make sure it's not going to get caught anywhere. Now you're going to fold these right sides together. And we are going to clip together these straight sides. We're not going to worry about the bottom corners. We're just going to do these sides for now. Now it does kind of help to fold the bottom in half just to make it so it lies flatter. And I'm actually going to just put a clip in there just to hold that in place to make it so it doesn't keep trying to pop open. But we're really only focusing on these diagonal side pieces. And do the same on the other side. Again, making sure that your fringe isn't sneaking its way into this seam. Okay, and now we're going to go down both of these sides, not the bottom, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that is done. My fringe is all staying where it's supposed to. I took a little bit of double-sided tape just to open up my side seams for later. Now we're going to box these corners. So that center mark we made on the short side of the bottom piece and the center of the seam that we just made, we're going to match those up. And clip it in place. And the exact same with the other side, making sure your fringe is out of the way. Okay, and we're going to take this to the machine and we are going to sew here and on the other side with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's done. You can flip it out and right side out and look at your work. Look how beautiful these corners are. It's a nice square box corner. So you can set that aside. Now we are going to start working on our lining pieces. Now I went ahead and did my zipper pocket. Because I do turn my bags differently, I do need to do a zipper pocket with an open bottom. So if you need to learn how to do that, I have the instructions for how to make that pocket down below. And I added on the slip pocket. This is not part of the pattern. It's just something I like to put in the bag. Okay, so you want to take your main zipper and your zipper pull. You're going to need that, your number 5 zipper pull. And what I like to do is on the back, I like to do just a straight line on the back of my zipper. And that's just going to help us put our zipper pull back on nice and straight after the fact at the end of the bag. Okay, so now you're going to pull the ends of your zipper apart and we need to turn them at a 90-degree angle. If you watched my tutorials in the past, you have seen me do this with many bags, especially with Shamballa bags. So you kind of turn it in upon itself at this angle and you want to make them nice and even on one end and hold it with clips. And then we're going to take it to the machine and we're just going to tack stitch that on along those raw edges to keep them at this angle. You could also hand sew this like that if you'd like to as well. So they are all tacked down, as you can see. Now you can pull your zipper tape apart. Now this is where we have to decide which way we want our zipper to go. I know my back panel, I like to have my zipper pocket and I like my zippers to open from left to right. So I know I'm going to have my angled part to the left. Now on our pattern piece, we have these markings where our zipper is going to start and stop. So you want to mark those with an erasable pen, of course. And we're going to take one side of our zipper and match the raw edge. We want the zipper tape to be facing up and the lining fabric to be facing up. And we're going to line up that 90-degree angle on the left-hand side. Again, the zipper tape is facing up and we are going to clip that all along the top. Now, usually I would use double-sided tape here, but because it's a curve, it's a little bit hard to get the tape to go on. And so I'm not going to do all of this in one go. We're going to baste this on and then we're going to add the top panel afterwards. And it's mainly just because of the shape. I want to make sure it all goes on evenly. So being mindful not to stretch your zipper tape. We don't want a wavy zipper. At the same time, you don't want it to be too loose. Okay, now, so when you get to that stop line there, that's where we're going to veer the zipper tape down. And that's because we do not want the zipper tail to get caught in that seam. We will end up putting a zipper end on the end of this when we're all done making the bag. So right at that mark, you want to veer the tape down. And holding it down here with a clip sometimes helps just to keep it out of the way. And then when we sew, we'll be sewing off of the zipper tape like this. So you're going to take this to your machine, put on your zipper foot, and sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have that on. Now I'm going to take my lining contrast piece. I'm going to match up the centers. Now this is going to seem a little bit awkward because it's going to seem like it doesn't fit because the curve of the top panel is almost feeling like it's going opposite from what the curve of the main panel is. Oh, at this point you can also trim off that little extra zipper tape if you want to, off of where we did our angled part side. So again, I'm going to use lots of clips just because this is on, see how it kind of goes up the wrong way? It seems like it doesn't want to fit on here, but it will. It's only because this is curved. So on the end that we're not sewing, it's going to look like it's kind of bunching up. That's because it is. As long as the end that we are going to sew to the zipper tape is nice and flat and flush, that's all that matters. Now the end of this top panel, you will notice doesn't match up perfectly. It looks like there's a little triangle at the end, and that is good. We want that. As you see, it goes kind of past. Make sure that your zipper tail is in behind. You don't want to get it caught. You want it to still end up veering down. And here's what I mean right here. See how it kind of doesn't match up? That is okay. That's because of the seam allowance. You'll see it'll match up perfectly once we're done. So go along here with your zipper foot at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Turn it up, and then along the bottom, push your seam to the bottom and top stitch right along the top of the lining fabric. So that's what it looks like there. So it's good to check to make sure that your zipper looks nice and even, and mine does. Now we need to do it with the opposite piece. Now we need to keep in mind that we will almost be doing it the opposite way for where we're putting our 90-degree angle side and our tail side, because you got to imagine these being right sides together, and we're going to want the tail side to be at the same side, so we'll be able to put on our zipper pull when all is said and done. So a good way to kind of envision how to do that is kind of put them on top of each other like this and flip them over, and I see where my start point is, and I'm going to make sure my other zipper, again right side up, that side matches where the other one is, and that the tail matches on the other side. So we're really putting it opposite to what we did with the first panel. So rather than starting on the left hand side, we are starting on the right hand side. And then the rest of it is the exact same process. So go ahead and finish with that zipper tape, and then go ahead and put on your top panel and do your top stitching. So that is all done. So now I just want to double check before I go any further that my zipper is actually on there nice and even, because it would really suck that if it wasn't when we were all done the bag. So I'm using my handy dandy fork to put my zipper pull on, and this is where those little lines on the back of my zipper tape that I marked come in handy, because when we put them into my zipper jig here, I want those lines that I drew to match up, because we knew it was nice and even at that time. And this never happens, but I got it first time. So now when I zip it up, you'll see that it is nice and even and there's no bubbles or anything like that. So I am very pleased with how my zipper looks. It's nice and evenly matched up, and my tails are nice and even where they veer down. So I'm going to take my zipper pull off again, just because it is a lot easier to work without the zipper pull hanging on there, because we could work with both sides separately. Okay, so we're going to put them right sides together, just like we did with the exterior. if you've forgotten to trim off your zipper tape like I did that's hanging down, not your tail, just where the 90-degree angle is, you can go ahead and snip that now. Now you want to match the seams where our top lining contrast piece and our lining meet. We want to have a nice continuous line there, and then clip down all the way along this side. Keep in mind, I am doing this different than the Shamballa pattern. We are not going to sew the bottom right now, and we are not going to do our box corners right now. We are going to do those through the open zipper pocket that we left. We'll sew up the bottom through that pocket later on, and you will see what I mean once we get there. So right now we're just concentrating on doing these side pieces, leaving the box corners and leaving the bottoms unsewn for now. And the reason I do this is because it's such a large bag, and it's quite thick with the foam and everything in there, that this just makes it turn very easily. So again, on the other side, make sure you match up that seam where our top band and our top contrast piece and our lining meet up. And also making sure that your zipper tails don't get caught in the seam at all. Okay, so we're going to go down here and the other side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we've done that, and you can see I've left the whole bottom completely open, and that is what we want. Again, this is not how it's done in the pattern. This is just how I like to do it. Okay, so now we are going to put our exterior into our lining. It would have been easier if I went in from the bottom because of all the fringe, so it works from the top too, but go in through the bottom and up. And then you won't have to struggle as much as I did here. Not that it's much of a struggle. But make sure you pull all of your fringe down and away. Again, you do not want it to get caught in the seam when we're sewing the lining and the exterior together. Ask me how I know. I have done it, trust me. Just one little strand gets up there, and then you're just having to undo it all and do it again. So be very aware of where it is, your fringes. Okay, so we're going to first take our 2 centers along the top of our exterior and our lining pieces and match those up with 3 or 4 clips. And again, on the other side, match up your centers. I always match up my centers and my sides first. And then our side seams, you want to try to flatten them out if you can, open them up, and match up those seams so they're nice and even. Now sewing this, I will warn you that these seams are rather thick. So if you are on a domestic going over these sides, when you're top stitching, you may want to hammer them down a bit beforehand. Or use your hump jumper when top stitching. And then go ahead and match up the rest of the lining and the exterior, just like this. And then I'm going to sew it from the inside like this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's done. So I'm just going to kind of go around and make sure everything was caught. Make sure nothing was out. And along the curvy parts, we're just going to take our pinking shears and trim the curves and down into this curvy corner, just to try to make our curves look nice and rounded when we go to top stitch and it folds down and around itself nicely. We are almost done. this bag is such a fast sew. Once you get past the cutting of the fringe, that takes the most time, I believe. You could probably put it into your Cricut Maker. If you know how to make a file to do that, that might help do that faster. But honestly, the cutting of the fringe was the thing that took the longest. It's not a difficult bag at all. Okay, so once you got the curves pinking sheared, just go ahead and pull through the bottom, and you'll see here why it's just amazing to leave the corners unboxed and everything in the lining. Look how easily that turned forward. So kind of go through here, make sure your tassels are not caught in the seam. Poke up your nice and curved seams here and make sure they went around nicely. And then push your lining into the bag and kind of roll the seams with your fingers along the top here. And put some clips along it to hold it in place. Nice finger presses along here. Again, it's all vinyl, so I cannot use an iron, so you just have to do with finger pressing here. And then I'm going to put it on my machine like this, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that you don't get your zipper tails caught in there. Make sure they're up and out of the way so you don't get them in that top stitch. Okay, now it's just closing the bottom of the bag. So this is, again, my way of doing this. You're going to pull that zipper that we left the hole in the bottom. Then we're going to reach in through there, and we're going to pull the whole bottom of the lining up and through that pocket, all the open side of that lining. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do once we get it out is find our straight edges, so the bottom part of the lining. And this is where we're going to like that we cut our little notches into our centers, because we're going to match those centers up. Then we kind of know where we are, because it looks like a big bunched up mess, but trust me, it is so easy to do this. So go ahead and clip that straight edge. Again, we are not doing the box corners just yet. We're just doing that bottom straight edge of the lining. And then you're going to take this to the machine and you're going to stitch the straight edge with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Again, leaving the box corners unsewn for now. Okay, so we've done that bottom edge. Now we can box the corners. So we want to take the side seam and the bottom seam that we just made and match them up. I just nest mine together. Secure with clips. Do the same with the other side. Again, nesting the side seam and the bottom seam together. And then you're going to take these to the machine and you're going to sew them with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm sorry, that's a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance you would be sewing those. So now you can push the lining back inside the bag. You can see it's completely sealed up. And now all we have to do is seal up the pocket. So just match up the nicely folded under edge already. Clip it together. And then we're just going to top stitch this closed with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you want to make sure that you have matched the seams. So my zipper pocket was starting to be a little bit crooked, so I'm just realigning it here. Repositioning and putting it back together. And then just top stitch that with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you can push the pocket back inside that where it's supposed to be and zip it up. And that's pretty much the exterior complete. Look at that exterior. You would never have known there's a hole in the bottom. So now all you have left to do is to trim up your tail. Oh, I lied. You want to put your zipper pull on just like we did, matching up those lines. Trim up your tail, put on your zipper end, and then rivet on your straps, and we are done. Hey everyone, so that's the end of the tutorial. My mic is crapped out, so hopefully you can hear me. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you have any questions. All my information is below if you need to contact me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Again, thank you, Sammy, for allowing me to do videos on your patterns. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.